1987 was an extraordinarily strange year. There were only two really big major events that I personally care to remember about that time, but that might have been because I was so tiny when this was all going on. What were those two events? Well, first of all, the most recent hurricane recorded in British history, and of course the premiere of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Initially attracting less than favourable attention, shall we say, for daring to continue the voyages in the service of the Federation without being a Constitution class, and without everyone's favourite airfare price negotiator on hand, it nonetheless featured one of the most iconic starships ever to sail the small and silver screens. And if you can't guess what I'm talking about yet, then obviously you can't read because we gave it away in the title. Red alert! This video is brought to you by Star Trek Fleet Command. It's time to beam on board your starship and join me in Star Trek Fleet Command. You will team up with iconic Star Trek characters and command legendary starships alongside your favorite officers. In this free-to-play open-world MMO game, you can gather your crew, customize your fleet, explore strange new worlds, seek out new life and civilizations, and begin to dominate the galaxy. In Star Trek Fleet Command, you command a starbase on the front lines of the Star Trek universe. You can construct fleets of your favorite ships, including the likes of the U.S.S Enterprise-D. Wahey! The game features more than 100 characters, including the likes of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Mr. Data, Mr. Worf, and Dr. Beverly Crusher. If you're ready to join the millions of players already exploring the galaxy, building their fleets, and competing in space battles, then click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to download Star Trek Fleet Command today. Perhaps today is a good day to play. Enjoy the video. Welcome to Trek Central, lords, ladies, and sovereign classes. I am your host, Lieutenant Commander Adam, and today we are breaking down Star Trek's one and only Big D. The Enterprise-D. The Enterprise-D, which the extraordinarily burly Andorian twisting my arm behind my back with unnecessary force insists is the best Enterprise, and I am contractually obligated to agree with him. Joking aside, there's no guarantee this gorgeous girl won't go gallivanting across our screens one last time in Picard Season 3, so I'm going to do some generic ooh and ah noises here for a second, so that our editor wizard Troy can have a chance to paste in any necessary updated visuals. Ready? Here we go. Ooh. Ah. There we go. Bases covered. As always, before we warp into this video, if you want to keep up to date on all the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates on the Star Trek universe. And as always, please let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, because if you're talking about Star Trek, naturally, we want to hear about it. Anyway, make it so. The Galaxy class was much more than just a ship. It was a big ship. A really big ship. It was clearly Trek's nod to the modern-day luxury cruise liner. It was massive. I mean, not Enterprise A, 70-odd decks high, flying upside down massive, but still up there as one of the largest we'd yet seen. Commander Orfeo Quinteros undertook the supervision of Enterprise-D's construction at Utopia Planitia Fleet Yards, where she was officially launched in 2363. Wait, hold on, that doesn't sound right. Where's my technical manual? Yeah, I was right. It was actually launched in 2358. It was commissioned on the 4th of October, 2363. Sorry to disappoint all those people who were just burning to start complaining in the comments. I won't be out-nerded that easily. Her career was incredibly impressive, albeit tragically short, lasting a mere 8 years before the Star Drive section and Saucer section had a marital dispute brought about by spending too much time with the Klingons. This unfortunate situation ended with a rather violent demise on the part of the Star Drive, and the Saucer section being temporarily reassigned to ground-clearing duty. The end. Roll credits. The Enterprise-D was an awe-inspiring technical achievement, the result of no less than 20 years of development from the finest engineering minds of the Federation's Advanced Starship Design Bureau, including Dr. Leah Brahms, who was largely responsible for the design of the warp engines pretty much single-handed. And yet, despite all of this incredible talent, it was blown up by a single bird of prey. An old bird of prey. I mean, yeah, they cheated. But that's even worse. Poor Star Drive. The Galaxy-class Enterprise came in at a whopping 641 meters in length, crewed normally by about 1,012 crew, give or take a few red shirts. Or is it gold? Which also included a number of civilians, be they families, Mott the Barber, Keiko O'Brien the botanist, Spot the cat, and of course a couple of dolphins for good measure. That tiny number would make running into someone in the corridor highly unlikely. Of that number, there are 13 different species and 17 members from non-Federation worlds, including one Ro Laren, who of course was Bajoran, which had yet to join the United Federation of Planets. Despite which, there's no evidence of her having to jump through all the hoops that they made Nog jump through, but shut up, Adam! No one cares about that! Enterprise was fitted with two LF-41 warp engines, and they put out a top sustainable warp speed of 9.6, 1,901 times the speed of light, for my fellow nerds out there. Protected by a high-capacity shield grid, 12 Type 10 phaser arrays at various strategic points on the hull, giving a full 360 degrees of coverage. The main dorsal array featured 200 emitters, each capable of a 5.1 megawatt burst. Of course, there were two safely usable torpedo launchers, one in the fore, one in the aft, and there was a sneaky third one hiding on the top of the star drive section for use either when the ship separates or when Worf presses the wrong button. Poor star drive. All three torpedo launchers were stocked with a shared supply of 250 photon torpedoes. The ship was also fitted with a passive ability, commonly known to all as plot armor, giving this Galaxy class the edge over the rest in the fleet, which turned heel and deserted whenever the script called for things to be more dramatic. That said, they're also crewed by the best and brightest graduates of the Academy, from her commanding officer Jean-Luc Picard, inventor of the two-time battle-deciding Picard maneuver, First Officer Will Riker, inventor of the Riker maneuver, both of them, Chief of Security and Tactical Officer Tasha Yar, later succeeded by the first Klingon ever to repeatedly have suggestions shot down in the history of Starfleet, Worf. And its second officer and chief of operations was Data, the first, last, and only android to serve in Starfleet so far. The best doctor to come out of Starfleet Medical, Beverly Crusher. The engineer that made visors and rolling under doors awesome again, Geordie LaForge. And then there's Counselor Deanna Troi.
I said shut up, as in close your mouth and stop talking.
Will, I sense how upset you are. You're angry and impatient.
Deanna, back off.
Whose specific job, more often than not, was pointing out the bleedingly obvious. You also had the single most polarizing character in Federation history, the youngest boy ever to have not graduated Starfleet, still be allowed to pilot the most advanced Starfleet ship of the fleet, making Data look like he's taken a day off when he's around, and Deus Ex Machina personified, Wesley Crusher. And of course, who could forget the most important human in history, Transporter Chief Miles O'Brien. Oh, and Guinan, of course, the Elorian. I was today years old when I realized that she has no eyebrows. And now so are you. Thank you, Dom, for that mind-blowing revelation. In terms of design layout, the same basic structure was kept on the Enterprise-D as had shown up on previous Enterprises, but made sleeker due to advancements in hyperflight dynamics. Whatever the heck that's supposed to mean. The saucer section is proportionally larger to the secondary engineering hull, also referred to the star drive, poor star drive, when separated. Interior space approximates to a staggering 3.5 million square meters, giving 110 square meters of living space per person. The specifications on the ship are astounding. There were more than 4,000 internal systems. Facilities on board included 3 sick bays, 20 transporter rooms, and over 100 research labs dedicated to numerous disciplines such as exobiology, cybernetics, astrophysics, geosciences, archaeology, cultural anthropology, and botany. You know those glowing blue squares on the aft of the saucer? That's the windows to the Arboretum, housing 3-story tall trees. Oh, and not forgetting stellar cartography, of course. Oh, and naturally, the 3 giant swimming pools used for cetacean operations. Crew amenities included 16 holodecks, a phaser range, a theater, a gym, a salon, several crew lounges, of which the most widely used was 10 forward. There were also classrooms provided for all of the kids you see for plot purposes and for the sake of making Alexander's life that little bit more difficult. Poor Alexander. In other words, it had everything any one of the 1012 crew could want or need, and could operate for 7 years without a refurbishment at a starbase, or 8 years without being blown up. Poor Star Drive. The sheer scale of this ship led to the phenomenon of a person being able to live on board for years and still not know their way around parts of it, likely due to parts being restricted to the appropriate personnel, but that's neither here or there. I mean, do you know absolutely every nook and cranny of your hometown? Don't answer that. Now, it's important to note here, of course, that some interior space had been intentionally left empty, with the forward thinking that when newer and more advanced technology had been developed, or otherwise not installed on a Tuesday, it could be used for such purposes. There were 144 distinct sensor palettes distributed across the Enterprise's hull, making sure readings were taken from all angles and directions. The majority of them ran the outer edges of the saucer and the extreme aft of the secondary hull, while a ventral pallet circled the captain's yacht, and the lateral sensors mounted along the port and starboard sides of the engineering hull, including the long-range, EM, telescopic, and thermal imaging arrays. Long-range sensors were most often used in empty space or at warp. High-resolution sensors could only reach about 5 light-years or so, whereas the low-resolution sensors could reach 17. However, the readings would be reduced accordingly. Within occupied space or star systems, short range were commonly used. All sensors constantly collected raw data converted into readable information, or whatever QuickTime animation Michael Okuda came up with that week. The ridiculous size and amount of facilities were provided because Starfleet had decided that serving personnel were more likely to sign up for long-term missions, which could often take years, if their families could come along and experience the dangers and horrors of unexplored space right along with them. The Galaxy was the first ship to be able to separate into 2 fully independent autonomous sections as well, and yes, there are suggestions that the Constitution class could separate its saucer, but we never saw it on screen. So you know what? It doesn't count. There are always inherent risks involved in space exploration, such as a window breaking, force fields failing to work, emergency bulkheads getting warped, innocuous murders and bodies hidden in the foundations of the nacelles. Well, this was an unprecedented period of peace for the Feds. After the Klingon war threat, and then the Romulans had been removed by the Khitomer Accords of 2293 and the Treaty of Algeron in 2311 respectively, the latter, which, as we are all well aware, prevents any Federation-aligned faction using cloaking technology or to cross into the neutral zone, among other things. This was also before new dangers emerged, such as the Borg and the Dominion. It was therefore deemed safe to have families on board. In emergency situations, all families and non-essential personnel would be evacuated to the saucer section, and the Star Drive section would tackle the threat or explode. Poor Star Drive section. And this was a fairly obvious arrangement, considering the Star Drive was warp-capable and now had an extra forward-facing torpedo launcher available. The Star Drive also had its own auxiliary battle bridge, which had a dedicated turbolift shaft from the main bridge to the right of the main view screen. Despite having access to the most parts that could go kaboom, such as warp nacelles, warp core, torpedo magazine, etc., the Star Drive maintained the majority of the weapon systems, all of the torpedo launchers, and seemingly all but 2 of the Galaxy-class's phaser arrays. It would engage the threat with only essential crew aboard. This would also include almost the entire engineering staff, whose only job was to keep that all-important hatch in main engineering from blowing open and causing a coolant leak, which would by extension cause a warp core breach, which by extension would cause the Star Drive to explode. Poor Star Drive. Oh well, at least there was nothing they could do. In exceptional circumstances, the two separated sections could engage together, attacking from differing angles, doubling targets, firepower, and gaining an overall tactical advantage. During its 8 years of service, the Enterprise-D utilized this ability just 4 times. What a waste of an awesome system, right? The first 2 times were both in 2364. During the inaugural Farpoint mission, when the ship was under threat by the omnipotent Q, and the second time in 2364 when the ship came under attack from the automated Minosian weapon platform. It then separated again in 2367, which proved to be a pivotal move in rescuing the assimilated Captain Picard from the Borg, and the final instance in 2371 saved the entirety of the crew in the fleeing saucer section. Spoiler warning, when the star drive was destroyed in an earth-shattering kaboom core breach following this devastating ambush of the rogue Duras sisters, Lursa and Betor. Poor star drive. Unlike recent retcons to the Constitution Enterprise, the D would simply reintegrate using automated control. Unless the first officer's arse wasn't sweating enough following the need to do so, then it would be a test in their ability to give perfectly specific, keen-eyed directional orders to the helm to reattach. Never mind that being slightly off base would kill everybody aboard. I mean, oh well. That seems like something that should have been saved for the holodeck, but then it wouldn't have given Picard the balls we know and love him for. The Connie Prize, and that's just how I'm going to refer to it now, I guess, after the establishment of its own separation capability, also added that it basically needed reassembly, as it were. Fan flicks show the original Constitution class employing the maneuver, but the first time it was seen in canon, with bunny rabbit ears, was the JJ Prize in Star Trek Beyond. The latter two canonical cases saw both saucers crashing down beyond repair on a nearby planet.
Or they might remember that time that someone hot-dropped the saucer section of the Enterprise-D on a planet.
One of the most important features of the Enterprise-D, or any ship for that matter, is the navigational deflector. The first and foremost operation of the deflector was to clear debris from the ship's path. At warp speeds, even microscopic particles or other particulates could cause significant damage to the hull, as Captain Janeway's Silverblood duplicate will tell you. The deflector projects a powerful gravitational beam that sweeps large objects out of the way. At the same time, a low-power beam directed a shield 2 kilometers ahead of the ship to deflect microscopic interstellar debris aside. Support craft on board included Type 15 shuttle pods, Types 5, 6, and 7 shuttlecraft, and then later the Danube-class runabout, which was likely added to their vast supply at the time of their launch in 2368, or at the time when 3 were transported to the new Federation outpost, Deep Space Nine. The main shuttle bay, situated within the saucer, though only briefly shown to poor scale on screen in cause and effect, was to be akin to a parking garage, equivalent to 2 decks high, various parking bays inside for the different shuttles, pods, runabouts, etc., overseen by a sort of air traffic control room. It was also equipped with internal tractor beams to aid in the retrieval of disabled craft. It would have been an impressive feature to see, but alas, due to Starfleet's budget constraints, only the 2 smaller bays, 2 and 3, located on the neck of the ship, were used. They were much smaller, for one, and easier to create a set for, in which would only house a handful of pods or shuttles depending on the episode's needs. Also, the Galaxy class featured a captain's yacht in the center, on the underside of the saucer. It was larger than a traditional shuttlecraft, elliptical in shape, roughly 18 meters long, 10 meters wide, and 8 meters high, and would normally be used to transport important dignitaries in instances where transporters were inappropriate or unavailable. Unlike shuttles, if necessary, it could be launched at speeds of up to Warp 7. Once separated from the main vessel, it would safely decelerate to a sublight speed, and the yacht could also land on planetary surfaces. So when you come down to brass tacks, what function did the Enterprise-D actually perform? Being the most advanced ship in the fleet at the time, it rightfully took its place as its flagship, and also the to-be-retconned ship to bear the name Enterprise, but the 5th Federation ship to bear that name. Its primary mission, to explore strange, new, and conveniently for budgetary requirements, predominantly humanoid worlds, to seek out new life and all that jazz. To make it so, when Picard wants to see more. To protect the Quadrant from devastation, to unite all races within the Federation, to ignore lower life forms from their perspective, to then preach and break the Prime Directive. Enterprise, warping off at the speed of light and often faster. Shut up, Wesley, or prepare to fight.
Meow! That's right!
Well, that went places. The first of the major conflicts the ship and crew took part in was against Q. Their entire voyage was a constant trial that never ends, in the effort to prove that humanity is worthy of their existence, that they have made considerable strides in putting behind centuries-old barbaric and dangerous ways. They made first contact with the Borg, successfully damaged and staved off a cube. That was, of course, until the assimilation of Mon Capitan Picard into the collective, which threw the safety of the entire Federation into question, if not the entire Quadrant for that matter. And there was the hastily formed fleet of 39 ships which were obliterated, save for one U.S.S Ahwahnee. It was at this time that Captain Riker employed essentially a multi-vector assault, with the two sections of the Enterprise attacking and confusing the cube in order to accomplish the mission to retrieve their Earl Grey-loving captain and save the day. Starfleet ended up on the losing side of a war with the Klingon Empire due to a temporal anomaly from which the Enterprise-C emerged, shifting the events of the battle at Narendra and subsequently altering the appearance of the Enterprise-D, internally at least, to be more of a warship. Despite being as badass as can be, the lasting effects of the war had already taken their toll. Therefore, it struggled against three birds of prey when protecting the sea to head back to her own time. During their treks across the stars, the Enterprise-D had three notable commanding officers. There was, of course, the legendary Jean-Luc Picard, who probably reprised the position more times than any other ship commander in history. During the season of the Borg threat and Captain Picard's capture and assimilation, Riker was given a promotion to captain and commanded the ship, with Commander Shelby sitting down into his well-shaken chair. Captain Edward Jellicoe, previously covered, go check it out, took temporary command of the flagship when Picard undertook a secret and failed mission to Celtris III. His manner of command was connected with high efficiency and protocol for senior crew to wear regulation uniform, but was so arrogant and close-minded it wound the crew so tight they were unable to do their jobs well. His captaincy was fought pretty much the entire way by Riker, leading to insubordination and abrupt relief of duty. In the end, their mission to rescue Picard was a success, thanks to his own plan and Riker's piloting ability. As we all know, the saucer section of the U.S.S Enterprise was hot-dropped, shall we say, on the surface of Viridian 3. Smash! A plaque dedicated to the Enterprise-D is seen at Starfleet Academy, and it's mentioned that this saucer was recovered to make sure its presence would not alter the development of the people on Viridian 4, next door, and would be taken to the Fleet Museum, which, as we know, is what Geordi LaForge is in command of. Mr. LaForge went to work and found a perfectly good secondary hull just lying around. As revealed by the Commodore himself, the USS Syracuse donated her engines and warp nacelles, therefore fully restoring the star drive section of the Enterprise-D. Happy star drive. Yay. The ship was revealed to the former Enterprise crew when they needed a new, old ship to help deal with the re-emergence of the Borg Queen after she had one too many plastic surgeries and went just a bit mental, as you do. After being extremely crippled by a future Admiral Janeway and her neurolytic pathogen, the Borg Queen had made a new plan. Use changelings! That'll fix everything! No, seriously. To alter the transporters of Federation ships and import organic Borg receivers into Starfleet officers' brains. Are you following along? I hope so. The newly remade Enterprise-D would go toe-to-toe with a Borg cube, which had emerged through a random transport conduit and was using Jupiter as a giant snuggie. This Borg cube had numerous communications arrays on it and a central beacon located at the heart of the structure. This allowed the Borg Queen to assume control of all the Starfleet officers with newly assimilated Borg brains. The Enterprise-D would fly through the superstructure of the Borg cube in a far more dexterous and agile manner than we ever saw her do on any of her previous appearances, destroy the beacon, and would save the lives of Picard, Riker, Worf, and Picard's son Jack, who had been assimilated into Vox of Borg. The ship would then be repaired from any damage it may have received and would take its rightful place at the Fleet Museum, a moment to its legacy. It was Andrew Probert who had the honor of designing this Enterprise. Where Kirk's Enterprise was considered as just as important a character as Kirk, Spock, McCoy and company, so too was the upcoming ship. Gene Roddenberry recalled Probert to reduce concepts, as he had previously worked on the motion picture as a concept designer and illustrator. The main bridge was the first thing on his mind, that it would be used for most filmed area aboard the ship, and the interior had to match the exterior. His new illustrations were based on paintings he previously made for his own amusement, shortly after the motion picture, of what a starship might look like even further into the future. Writer and producer David Gerrold put forward the sketches that would provide the direction for the final design. From then, it was just a matter of refining the shape and adding design details, which is a massive understatement, by the way. Details for sections, some of which weren't even mentioned, used on screen, or even alluded to, that were just there as if to say, yeah, this looks good. And yeah, it did. Yeah, it does. As an idea, on screen now are the minute detailing that went into this iconic vessel. A legend in letters, the 50-meter-high lettering used for the ship name and registry in bold black outlined in red. The captain's yacht in its place on the ventral saucer, in case it was ever needed. Just in front of the ventral registry is the saucer deflector, one of those small but important details that would have fans up in arms for basic survivability in space against that fist-sized hole punching space dust. Emergency flush vents, RCS thrusters, transporter emitter pads, escape pods, even the antimatter loading port on the ventral engineering hull just forward of the Starfleet Delta. Navigation lights, which, in keeping with traditional modern craft, would give a visual identification and indication of which direction the vessel or craft is traveling. First and foremost, green is found on the right or starboard side, red is on the left or port side. Probert wanted to create an advanced version of Kirk's Enterprise and hoped to retain the feel of its forebear to appease the reservations of fans about the beloved original being replaced. As a result, the same basic design layout was kept, but changed the proportions, such as the saucer being much larger by comparison to the engineering hull. The nacelles, while being kept to the aft of the ship, were positioned to be seen between the two hulls, closer to the center of mass. Another change saw the struts holding the nacelles and neck supporting the saucer slant forward toward the front of the ship. To quote Probert himself, this gave the new Enterprise an aggressive forward movement, like a lunging cat. The initial design was so successful with Gene, he only had two changes. One was to put the bridge back on top, as Probert had moved it to somewhere in the middle of the ship, where it would be protected, and for the nacelles to be made longer. The only part that caused design problems was the ship had to look as good in separate sections as it did together. The initial design didn't take that into account. His first vision of how it would work, believe it or not, the ship was originally going to have a battle section nestled into the saucer with its own warp nacelles. To quote again, what I came up with was a shape like the initial D. Deja vu, which if you lay it down on top of the saucer with the rounded edge toward the front and then extend the serifs, those would be the warp engines. This thing would be nestled into the top of the saucer and it would go separate to fight the battles. This of course was rejected in favor of splitting between the saucer and star drive. After playing around with several different designs before landing on the idea of a broad mounting point, which gave the star drive that much better looking cobra head shape. Probert even went further and experimented with more pieces separating to act as lifeboats, but this just led into simple escape pods. The finishing touches to add included the captain's yacht, as stated previously on the underside of the saucer where the sensor dome would have been on Kirk's ship. A lot, and I do mean a lot, of variously shaped and sized windows spread across the hull, especially the leading edge, where it was reasoned the crew would want to look out and keep in touch with the environment. Because who doesn't enjoy looking out into the endless void of space? No, I'm really asking that. I find it quite relaxing myself. One element that was omitted from the design of the ship was landing gear. That's right, this ship, or at least the saucer, was envisioned to land. 4 landing pads were on the underside of the Constitution refit for the motion picture, so it was very much in mind to do the same with the Enterprise-D. Probert started to do the landing gear, but was distracted away from it, and that poor ship paid the price. Words again from the man himself. Way back in 1987, the only realistic way to film a Starship was to build a physical model. The contract for the D was given to Industrial Light and Magic, ILM. The team led by Greg Gine and Bill George, legends both, built 2 models of the new ship, a 6-foot used for most effects shots, and a 2-foot version, which would be used for shots of the ship going to warp. Probert had designed the ship to have a blue or green tint reminiscent of the bluish color created by 1960s VFX techniques. However, that created a problem. As for VFX, the ship couldn't be blue, so the lighting was adjusted to give the ship more of a pearl gray color. This is one of the reasons that establishing the correct color is due to the studio models and the on-screen version being very different colors indeed. Working with the 6-foot model proved difficult, and it took 6 people to lift it from its mount. So for the 3rd season, Greg Gine, who by this time had left ILM, built a more manageable 4-foot model. This is where the subtle differences in the models start to come in, such as the windows for 10 forward. By the time the movie Generations came around, the 2- and 4-foot models weren't nearly detailed enough for the big screen. The 6-foot model was taken out of mothballs and given a new coat of paint, giving the ship yet another subtle change. But hey, some idiot probably bumped the hull with an inspection pod at space dock and they couldn't replicate the same color. Can't argue really, I mean, Kirk's Enterprise went to space dock and came out with a completely new body. Pretty much. The next time a Galaxy class appeared was in DS9. And for this occasion, a basic CG model was designed and used. But for her final, at the time, appearance, the D was given a major makeover for Star Trek Enterprise, so a new HD CG model had to be created. But since then, another, however brief, appearance was to come. The most arguably best rendering of the ship yet to appear in all of her glory in Star Trek Picard. The Galaxy class appeared in every episode of The Next Generation, Generations, as well as showing up as a variety of ships in Deep Space Nine, including the Enterprise-D and, of course, the Odyssey, the latter not faring too well because she lacked that all-important plot armor I mentioned earlier. Now, 3 runabouts outlived her. That's a terrible record. No wonder they wanted to make it better in the form of the Ross class. But who are we kidding? The Enterprise-D basically made the Galaxy famous, with more screen time than any other class across the most series. She even made an overshadowing appearance in the Enterprise finale closing scene. Last, and definitely not least, Picard. And that clip brings us full circle. The Galaxy is easily the most iconic, most seen, and, all my silly jokes aside, most awesome. Don't argue. Zip it! If you want to keep up to date on all the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure you hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media or join our community Discord server. But for now, I've been Lieutenant Commander Adam. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends.